just a reminder to those, watching that we are going to be at NOCO this year. We're a proud sponsor of the WAFBA Awards of Excellence, and we are currently accepting nominations for the awards that we'll be giving out that day. So I'll make sure to soon share a link. So make sure you get your nominations in. They'll be open until March 1st. So you have a little bit of time, but I recommend just getting it out of the way and doing it today. So we welcome all submissions and we encourage you to do so. In addition to that, we also have tickets for sale for the banquet, and I'll actually share a link for that as well too. Tickets are going fast, so if you want to make sure you're going to be there, I would recommend purchasing tickets soon, because we'll keep going until they're sold out, but seating is limited. So once they're sold out, there's nothing more we can do. So if you really want to be there, I recommend getting the tickets soon, and I'll get a link for everybody in the description here shortly. And as usual, if you want to become a member, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to take some time to get to know you, share what GHA is up to, and how you can really take advantage of the membership benefits that we offer. And for those who are members, I see you guys in the chat list here. So thank you for joining. And the invitation is always open to you as well. If you want to talk about your membership or just get to know each other, don't hesitate to reach out as well.
Okay, and nominees get free tickets. The top nominees get free tickets to the banquet, so that's kind of cool. And then also, did you say giving away the tiny home?
Oh, I didn't mention that part. Yeah.
Okay, it's really cool. We've got an awesome, actually, I was going to say he's logging on, but he's not. We've got an awesome opportunity. We're partnering with another member who is building a tiny home, and we're raffling it at NOCO. And so it's kind of a cool opportunity. It'll be kind of custom built, which is also awesome. So we'll explain the details a little bit more as we get into it, but we're pretty excited. So anybody else have anything? Hi, Hannah. Hi, Robin. It's good to see you guys. Hello. If anybody else has anything that they'd like to chime in on, we'll just take a few more minutes. Hi, Josh. It's good to see you. Hi, Jay. How are you? Hi, Stuart. Hi, Estrelle. How are you?
Hi, Mandy.
Yeah, so if you guys have anything that you'd like to chime in on, please feel free while we're waiting. Anything exciting or any topics that maybe you'd for surely like to touch on. For those of you that don't know Bert, I'm really excited. Bert, if you have anything you want to chime in on before we really get started, you're more than welcome to.
Oh, no, I'm good. This looks like a great group today, so I'm looking forward to it.
He's got his camera off because he just lost internet. And so when you turn your camera off, your sound is much better. And so he can turn it on, of course, but I encouraged him to not so that we could hear him really good. But hi, Sandra. It's good to see you.
Hi, I actually have something I really wanted to bring up, which is I wanted to make sure that everybody knew about the $1 billion Climate Smart grant program that USDA announced yesterday. And I think it'd be an incredible thing for you all to spearhead some coordination on that.
Awesome. I would love to actually dive into that more. We actually have somebody that's doing some grant writing for us, and we've got somebody else that just submitted a project that really gave her some excitement. And so that is something, I don't know if you'd be interested in collaborating or having a discussion about what that might look like for the association. I'd be down to further that with you.
Absolutely. I think it's something that we might actually want to even have a collective call on here. Because it's huge. I mean, the grants go up to, I think I thought it was 50 million. It might even be 100 million. I mean, they're large grants. The minimum one's 250,000. You can do a lot of damage with that.
That's great. Okay, so as part of Global Hemp Association, I'm going to put this out here real quick. We are putting together, or have put together, a number of committees. I see a lot of you on here that we have definitely, your names have been mentioned as great stakeholders that may want to participate. And one is around the funding and the grants and the opportunities there. So that we have not officially formed that committee, but if anybody on here was interested in getting involved, I would open that up and invite you in for a discussion to see what that might look like and give you a little bit of feedback on what some of our other committees are currently doing, our research committee and our farm committee. So either of those also, if you guys are interested, I'd love to have your feedback. Okay, so before we get into the weeds or get it off anymore, I'd love to get started and hand this over. I'm really excited about having Bert on today. I really encourage you guys to open up for questions. If you guys have any other topics that you'd like to address, please either drop them in the comments or raise your hand and we'll call on you. I do open this up for discussion. I'm excited for topics that I may not be thinking about or may not be talking about that need to be addressed and talked about. I see Robin and Hannah are also on here, great resources. So please don't hesitate to raise hand or drop questions and we can address them. Kayla, do you have anything else? I see you're on here. I don't know if you're busy probably, but before we get started.
Nope, I've got my hand full. I just wanted to say hi to everybody. I've been connecting with a lot of you over in Hemp Hallway. So I appreciate the connections there and really making some progress and some headway with some projects that have been posted in Hemp Hallway. So a lot of exciting things. But yeah, I've got my hands full at the moment, so I won't take up too much more time.
Just checking in. Okay, well, with that being said, Bert, you want to go ahead and give yourself an intro and kind of dive into some of the topics that we discussed?
Yes, very much excited to be here, Mandi. My background is purely farming and consulting. I had a little bit of an introduction to the hemp industry in 2017, where we were very active in getting our hemp production, our hemp commission funded. And it was really unique. Every state had a different story, but ours was unique because a bunch of farmers rallied around that initiative. And in the process, we created a co-op to basically capitalize on the opportunity we thought industrial hemp was going to be. And I emphasize was, and now we're going to talk about the is, because at that moment in time, we were not as far down the path as we thought, or as we were led to believe. And that wound up being very costly. So that won't get too far along on that path. But for now, we kind of went through the CBD phase of the industry. That's kind of settled in now and leveled out. And really the pandemic threw so many people off chart or off course. It gave everyone a little bit of time to kind of regather themselves. And now it's like forever has passed since 2017. And now there's all these new faces and this new energy. And I'm very excited to see that, we've got some real opportunities now, which a lot of us were really interested in the fiber industry and the seed industry. So my background is simple, a crop consultant for 20 years, and I currently farm. And more recently, I'm excited to announce that I am working with Hannah and Robin and Corbett Metif in Tennessee. And we've come together to supply European genetics to the industry and making sure there's a good footprint in the US to support that. So that's my most recent news. And I do have some other consulting engagements with some very prominent companies that I feel like are going to make waves. But we'll talk about that another time.
Okay, so I don't know if there are any questions right off the bat that somebody wants to dive into. I'm kind of curious about what the infrastructure looks like that we need to build so that we can have a sustainable supply chain of genetics for the United States.
The infrastructure to supply the genetics, or the infrastructure that the genetics would support?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, I think I understand. I'm curious really about what is it that we need to build so that we can have a sustainable or a steady supply of genetics that will feed the demand that we're going to have here in the US.
Excellent. That is a good two-part question. So currently, what we're facing is we've actually got the infrastructure here. Once there's a demand, a strong demand for these genetics, and it's a steady demand, a steady supply chain that can be built. We've got professionals here that are, excellent at seed propagation, research, all of these things. So in the meantime, I think to support that infrastructure, we would likely be best to invest in a steady growth and a calculated approach to the industry where we have to stay excited, to get up and go to work every day, but we can't let that excitement throw us off track and promote different companies to take shortcuts, because that's basically going to end poorly for everyone. So I feel like the infrastructure is already exists in the United States. It will just simply be when the demand rises to a certain point, that infrastructure will then shift its attention to hemp. And there'll be some, standalone facilities, I'm sure. But at that point in time, all the research and all the hard work that a lot of this network is participating in, that's when that'll really come, to fruition. We'll get to see that on farms everywhere. So that would be my quick answer. I know plenty of seed propagators. I'm sure others in your network do as well. So I feel like we're in pretty good shape. The big thing will be to make the right deals and to handle the genetics from other suppliers and countries, and to be good stewards of those genetics, and to make sure that they understand that, their IP and their protocols will be adhered to, and to really make sure that our industry understands that that's of the utmost importance. If they choose to have, good genetics from all over the world, then we're going to have to really play by the rules and not take any shortcuts, and basically do it the right way. The next question, the next part of that question, as far as infrastructure to support that need for propagation, you kind of see the grassroots at work right now, because there's so many companies and so many people with different initiatives. I'll try not to drop too many brands and names, but there's a lot of energy right now in the process side of this for fiber. There's a lot of equipment that's being imported from other countries. So it's just simply time for all that to unfold. These are really, really good operators and engineers. And so I think we're going to see some new technology also that will come online to support that initiative. In the meantime, it goes back to, cautious optimism, where we're not getting too excited and growing too much hemp before we really get this infrastructure dialed in to support the industry. Because again, the last thing we need is a bunch of hemp stockpiled in farmers' warehouses that wasn't grown to the right or specific parameters to meet the market need. So it's very much, it's a strange time where we're super excited because we're at the doorstep and you want to just run through it, with everything you've got. But the reality is that it's time consuming and it's a grind. And for this to be done right, there's going to have to be so much attention paid to detail and doing things right that it's going to be a slower path than a lot of people think. And that's something that my partners and I agree on, is that this is a long-term, industry play. This is not something that's going to be here and built tomorrow. If we're lucky, this will be in place, at the end of the decade. That's a realistic goal. And, for a lot of us, that can't get here fast enough. But to me, that's the true timeline for hemp to just be another crop in the field. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of focus and attention to detail.
What are some, Klaus, do you have a question?
Nope, sorry, I don't.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity. What are some of the things as a crop consultant, right? Some things that maybe are not being looked at or should be addressed in research this upcoming year to move industry forward?
Well, it's been my experience. There's a lot of research that needs to be done, honestly, to tear down some of the preconceived notions and some of the things that were advertised, for the last, I'll go beyond the last 5 years, for the last 20 or 30 years. Sometimes people, they have these aspirations, and they could be true in the perfect world setting. But I believe very simple things like stand establishment, uniformity, consistency. Those are the things that matter the most right now, because we're limited in our chemical tools, which we're very accustomed to here in the U.S. A lot of people are happy about that. There's going to be limited chemical use, but the reality is that makes some of the things that we're accustomed to very difficult. So it's actually a great learning opportunity. The research that we do now hopefully will promote standards and field operations that give farmers the best chance for success. And right now, it's a catch-22 because I know a lot of people in your group are big regen ag fans, as am I, which involves a lot of no-till and reduced tillage. Currently, it has to be a long-term no-till system for hemp seed to be planted and to come up consistently. You know, the rule of thumb in other countries is not necessarily heavily invasive tillage, but for sure, there's a certain amount of tillage that occurs to get up. We call it a dance floor, like a soft, fluffy dance floor, where that seed it finds the same depth and the same moisture, and all the conditions line up perfectly for all of that seed to emerge within 6 days. Short and simple is stand establishment. The most important research that I feel that we can do for the farmers is stand establishment. And then on the heels of that, you know, once we do get that crop established, a lot of the fertility is pretty straightforward. I feel like crop characteristics, you know, to see how these different genetics from different countries and different latitudes, to see how they respond, you know, to our geographic farm regions. And that's going to involve a lot of industry input where they tell you, wow, that worked great, or wow, that wasn't so great. And the irony is that they're going to have to spend those, you know, tens of millions of dollars to get that equipment in place to even test the crop that we grow. So there's definitely, if you can't tell, you know, where I'm coming from, I put it out there pretty quick. There's just an immense amount of work to be done to fulfill the crop's true potential.
Agreed. Right, we're all trying to figure out how do we speed that up and work together. What about seed and planting density? Can you speak a little bit about what you've found and some experience you've seen there?
Yes, I think that also is going to be very important. I think now a lot of people are warming up to the conversation where, you know, there's a lot of variability in seed size, you know, from one variety to the other. So there'll be different varieties that serve different market needs that will be, you know, 20 or 30% smaller in some cases, where you'll have to have a 60-pound rate to achieve the same, you know, density that you might need 75 pounds in other varieties, or 50 pounds. And so there's a, you know, 20 or 30% swing in a lot of these genetics. And that's also valuable work that's going to have to be done, because it all comes back to consistency. No matter what the end use is, you know, for seed or fiber, for that matter, even CBD, when that was a big topic of discussion, you know, your uniformity and consistency in the field is going to translate to those same properties in some type of processing facility.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about some of our seed trials and things we're doing on scalable, right, across different different states and different regions, with an intention of taking that fiber into the process, right? Does anybody else have questions about research or work that he's done, what he's doing now, genetics? I don't want to hog up the time. Gary, Kayla, Josh, John, I see your camera coming on. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Hi, everybody. Bert, this is John Carpenter. I've got a couple of quick questions for you. One, you indicated that you're bringing in European varietals into the United States. Do you see the European producers? And if I ask a question that's proprietary or something you can't discuss openly, then just say, John, that's off limits. But do you see Europeans who have large seed banks for existing varietals that would be well suited for certain microclimates or climates in the United States, scaling their operations to accommodate the need in the immediate for those varietals in the US? Secondarily, do you see that as a stage towards then ultimately creating genetics that are more indigenous to the US and creating a seed bank for different areas over, you know, a 2 to 4 year period? So that's kind of a two-part question on seed sourcing. The other question I have for you, which is related to processors, you indicated that there are a large number of sophisticated operators coming into the United States with fiber processing equipment originating from Europe. Could you speak to either the groups that are doing so or the type of equipment that's coming in and the timeline for that? So it's kind of two questions, and if the answers are too long, then maybe take it offline. Thank you.
No problem. That's a great question. I'll turn the first question into a three-part question. The short answer is that the European producers are certainly paying attention to our market. I feel like it'll be a very steady growth, and a lot more attention will be paid in the very near future. It's going to come down to basic economics. I think they're going to have to see enough seed sales to prompt them, to risk, taking their genetics and propagating them here in the U.S. There's already that, phenomena occurring currently. So what they'll do is, obviously logistics are a big issue. So this year, even if the sales and the demand might come in a little bit late this year, but the reality is most seed across the ocean, they really should have been shipped in December. And we've been kind of saying that for many years, but it's very hard to motivate that type of capital and effort and plan that far ahead for a crop. And that's where some outside potentially funding might play a large role in the future, where a group might gather some resource and go ahead and prepay and order a large amount of European seed and have it stockpiled and ready to go in a traditional setting where farmers are going to go pick their corn seed up next week. A lot of guys will be getting their crops in the warehouse just because they like to see it and know that they've got it. We're very fortunate. We've got one container right now that's in Norfolk. We're anxiously awaiting the paperwork to have that released. So we're very, very happy that we've got some great genetics that have great germination rates to provide this year to a group of farmers that would be interested in that. And some of that's already pre-sold. But then beyond that, the answer is that those propagation partners we mentioned earlier in the conversation, they'll be selected very carefully. And that selection will certainly be dependent on the geographic location, where they are, what markets they might serve. So for example, someone in the Midwest, where they've got a huge dual crop initiative going on, they're already working with the Canadians. The Canadians are very strong with grain production. We found that out 5 years ago. So we can learn a lot from what they're doing, and we already are. If we're going to be more on the East Coast right now, which is much more focused on fiber production, then in all likelihood, some of these companies that we work with that have some great fiber varieties will likely seek partnerships in that region. And you go back and forth from the U.S. to these other countries because Australia and China, everyone knows that they also have varieties here that are very vigorous and are growing well. They're all paying attention to the U.S. And what we're seeing is they're now beginning to pay a lot of attention to what genetics and varieties will float further south than we've seen traditionally, because we represent European genetics, but we're very aware that some of those genetics should not be placed below a certain latitude. And because the stewardship, aspect of what we're trying to do, we place the right varieties with the right region to make sure that whoever's investing that time and energy has the best chance of success for their end goal. So that's two parts. The third part, I will dance around a little bit. I won't mention any specific names, just because I'm not sure if it's proprietary or not, so better to play it safe. But I know of at least 3 large decortication, initiatives that are already planning to be deployed here in 2023. That being said, they're going to have to get here, get set up, and get dialed in. So this goes back to that patience quotient where they're coming, they're definitely online, and there's no need to forget that Europe's been doing this for decades. And so there's a lot of expertise. Hannah's on this phone call. I've learned a lot in discussions with her. But in the meantime, there's a place for everyone. That's where the U.S. equipment that's being built is getting better every season. You could say that it's getting better every week. The more hemp that they run through it, the better they're getting it dialed in to meet the needs of industry. And this also circles back, John, to some of the experts that we have at our disposal. Been very fortunate. When we floated around here early on in this hemp revival, a lot of these people had been doing this type of work for decades, and it just wasn't time. And nobody really knows why. It could be political. It could just be, it was in the ether. But 100%, these guys know what it takes to get this crop in products to be sold. And so I'm confident they will have European processing and U.S. processing. And a lot of times they'll be in the same assembly line, in the same production system. So I would say that you'll see these larger units come online. Some of them will land this year, but you'll see them in 2023 in full effect, I would guess.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. There's a few on here, and then I want to dive into end product and quality of fiber and markets that the different strains or genetics are going into. Real quick, can you speak to how to manage the issue of crop going hot? For example, licensed THC level in Australia can be under 1% THC. Can you speak to that a little bit? Or
yeah, a lot of that, and this has been a moving target. There was a lot of attention paid to this, obviously, with the CBD boom. The short answer is very much ingrained in the genetics. A lot of people want to say that stress can cause a spike, and different climatic events can cause a spike. But I feel like the science has already proven that it's in the plant, it's in the genetic breeding, and it's actually in how well those genetics are procured over time. That's how important it is to have a really solid program and a solid resource to get your seed, because there's a lot of effort. People don't understand the effort that goes into keeping a genetic strain consistent. Hemp is a wild plant. It's a wild weed, and it tends to evolve all over the place, and it evolves quickly to its environment. Sometimes that can change different characteristics of the plant, and so we're very, very I don't think adamant's the right word, but we're hyper vigilant that whoever we sell our seed to realizes that it has to be bought from a reliable source, and it cannot be kept for reproduction, because it doesn't take but a crop or two for that plant to begin to express different types of cannabinoid profiles, different types of fiber characteristics, the herd and consistency. So a strong, solid breeding program is really where that 0.3% or less begins. Now, there's a really unique classic United States element to that question. Right now, we've seen a few states, we've got kicked out of our program. I'm not happy to say that North Carolina, we lost our state program and went full bore with the federal program. I had a couple of very sharp lawyers point out to me yesterday that, you guys are going to be really under the microscope with your program this year. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the federal government's getting geared up to regulate this crop across the country. And the reality is that there's very few states that are going to be in that federal supervision. So that means that some of the early adopters like Kentucky and Colorado and even North Carolina, they were able to, I won't say turn a blind eye, because that's certainly not the case. There are plenty of crops destroyed, but there was a certain amount of local, I'll go ahead and say it, common sense, that if it was a fiber crop and it was 0.04, as soon as you knock that crop down and let it ret and process it, that's just not going to be the case. That it's going to be combined with the whole plant. And so we had that discussion, and if it's a CBD crop where it's flower, it can be a big deal. That 0.5 or 6%, it can really accumulate in volume. But if it's a fiber crop or a seed crop, by the time it's processed and decorticated or harvested and the grain is captured, then that THC is just not going to be that big of an issue. So I think that these other countries like Australia, like China, they're aware of this limitation. And I think right now the companies that have invested in those genetics, I think they're aware of that risk. And so their only recourse, is to take samples along through the season and probably capture that crop before it goes hot. And if they don't do that, then they're certainly still at risk, for that crop being a big black eye to their program. So I'm aware of the success that people are having with different varieties from different countries. And so the last thing that I would want as an industry supporter, would be for somebody's crop to be destroyed, confiscated, rendered useless because of a few percentage points, which we all realize now are just ridiculous. But it doesn't change the federal government's perspective, unfortunately. So that was a really long-winded answer to say it's in the genetics. That THC is more so, it's going to go there. In other words, if it's 1% in perfect conditions in the country of origin, it's going to do the same thing here in the States, no matter what you do. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. Good answer. Good questions, guys. Let's see. For cannabinoid production, aren't certified clones the solution to seed instability?
Absolutely. That goes back to it's a question that's probably smarter than I am, but that was the big reason when we were doing our co-op work, we steered clear of seed production. Although it was much cheaper, it was a huge difference of cost per acre until it started kind of coming down towards the clones started leveling out in the last years, of course, right as the industry began to implode. But that's a very good point. Clones are much more consistent because if the parent plant is 0.2 or 3% or less, then that clone is just an extension of that plant. So that is true.
Okay, so here's a question, and I'm not sure how much we know the answer. It's so dependent on others, but when will it be legal to feed hemp grain to cattle? Hard to grow grain when there's no market. And will any of those decorticators be coming to Texas?
That's a very specific question. So I won't mention any names for sure in this answer. And I'll answer the second part first. My understanding is yes, there'll be some processing facilities in Texas.
Yes, we know of a few in our group that are also opening or coming on board in Texas.
Yeah, and there's actually some really great new technology that's being piloted in that region as well. So I think we've heard that in some of your presentations, and I'm excited to see what that technology holds for the industry. The first part of that is I could not agree more. Where's the market? That's the best question that anybody should ask. I was very privileged to have a call yesterday with one of your members from the Midwest. I'll just leave it there. And I was very encouraged to hear that there was a reasonable sized, big production need for grain. And I don't know that it was specifically for animal feed, but there is an initiative now, this pushing that envelope as hard as they can to make authorities realize that there's absolutely no need for us to wait 5 years for bureaucracy. And there's, frankly, I won't name the states, but there's a lot of states, they're just skipping that whole step of regulation. There's already a lot of seed that's going to be produced for animals. And there's already a lot of green material and byproduct that's being fed to animals. And I don't know where that resides in the realm of things as far as legality and moving the industry forward in the right way. The farmer in me tells me that if they're my animals and they're my fields, and I know there's nothing wrong with it, I think there's some 100-year-old law that allows farmers to grow and feed their animals whatever they want, especially now that it's federally legal. But when you distribute that seed in a commercial way, that's when it changes gears. So I feel like they're getting away with, they're getting a blind eye turned right now because it is a much more organic setting where they're actually feeding what they grow to their animals. I feel like when you start to see, hemp grain and feed supplements and hemp grain for sale at Tractor Supply, And that's when the supervision is going to be much greater, because then we're going to adhere to all of the laws and all the protocols that are in place. But it's a great question. And so I would definitely I would express a lot of caution in growing that crop and assuming there's going to be an animal feed market right away. Unfortunately, I feel like that bona fide market is just a few years off. And somebody hopefully would tell me I'm way wrong on that. But I'm afraid that that's the case.
So tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, Morgan with Hemp Feed Coalition is going to be on to talk about this topic specifically, just FYI. So if anybody would like to join, I'll share the link as well in the chat so that everybody has it. But this is a huge topic that definitely opens market for the grain. And so I know that, you know, like Bert said, there's people actively pushing this to be legalized or to be approved.
And there's a lot of effort. I don't know. I can't. I'm not taking time to look at all the people on this call right now, but I will throw out Gary Sykes's name because he was part of that Hemp Coalition feed discussion. As I recall, he made a road trip or two with some press cake to get some studies done on that nutritional value. So I will give him some credit there. You know, that initiative and that idea, it's been hot for. Now, I hate to say it's been 3 years probably since that happened. And so here we are. It's going to be that 5 or 6 years down the road that when the Hemp Coalition was formed, they made everybody aware, you know, this is a 5-year job. This isn't going to happen overnight. This is going to be a concerted long-term effort. So I really wish those guys the best of luck because they're doing the hard work. You know, they're having to pull through all this red tape. But I think they're making progress. And I think IND Hemp, as an example, I think they may have figured out some type of fertile ground for that discussion. So I hope it continues.
Yeah, they've been working hard. So I hope things come through, understanding how challenging it is in the industry. And so give credit where, you know, everybody that's pushed through on it. Gary, do you have anything that you want to add?
Listen to Morgan tomorrow.
Yes. Good advice. I'll share her information. Thank you. If you have any questions or anything you want to chime in as well on the farm side, please don't hesitate. There's a lot of really great people on this call. So I want to say thank you for everybody that's joining and thank you for members that have paid membership. I appreciate it very, very much. There's a lot of you on here. It keeps us going. We are running national seed trials. We've dropped notes about it a number of times. I will share the link to one of them so you can listen to a Q&A about it if you have questions. It addresses a lot of these same things we've talked about, the stability of seeds, how important they are, the purpose of this to be able to show one way or the other, these inconsistencies that we're going to start seeing. I want to kind of dive in, Bert, and I don't know how much, I want to kind of dive into the genetics and what end markets we're seeing those become the most successful in. You know, is it textiles for clothing? Is it, commercial applications for construction and building materials? You know, what are some of the?
I'd be glad to give you what insight I have, and the crop consultant me can't leave the grain without some quick insight. I'll come right back to your question, Mandi.
Please.
I feel like I could share with this group openly that our experience with grain in North Carolina, you know, we were going to be the first. You know, we were going to go big, and we had a very robust conversation going on with the Canadians, and they were just, you know, they weren't laughing at us, but they realized how little we knew at that time about hemp grain production. And now you've got leaders, you know, that like Chad Rosen, who've been just doing an amazing job with this. But the two things of caution that I would provide with hemp for grain, one is that contrary to popular belief, it was my experience that corn earworms really liked hemp seed. And so if you're in a heavy moth flight area where there's already existing worm pressure for other crops, it was my very distinct experience that they decimated that crop without chemical tools. So that means that you would need to utilize organic, you know, chemistry and IPM methods and long-term control. So that quick go spray it, they're dead that we have for other crops does not exist in hemp. And so if you do go down that grain production path, proceed with caution. I'm definitely not saying it can't be done. It already is. But I would definitely, extend that. Also, in traditional crops, where usually we're used to seeing the crop completely die to get the seed and for the harvesters to really make quick work of the crop. Depending on the varieties, hemp is not that way. A lot of times the seed will mature prior to the crop maturity. And so you find yourself having to run your equipment through green plants, which is really unique to our train of thought. So if you wait for the plant to die down like you would traditionally, a lot of that seed can fall out immediately, like overnight. So those are two big hurdles that I would not like to see any group or any farmer have to contend with like we did. And then lastly is the infrastructure to handle the seed. It is a magical supplement for humans and animals. Part of that reason is the heavy oil content, and that heavy oil content creates its own challenges for storage and handling. And so I would definitely provide that insight as well. Don't plant the crop unless you've got some really unique storage and handling infrastructure and strategy in place, because it's different than our traditional grain. So there you go. I couldn't leave it without touching that base. So
you can keep talking. You're just fine.
that was just, it's one of those things. If you get off a call, sometimes you're like, man, I wish I'd have reminded, I wish I'd have told people about that, because that was a big black eye, and I have not forgotten it. That was 5 years ago now. And I feel like it was yesterday. I took a picture of this big purple worm. I said, there's even new worms that have found this hemp crop. I've never seen anything to beat it. But North Carolina is next to a tropical forest sometimes, so we get all kinds of pests here. To your question about genetics and finding different fiber markets, correct?
Yeah, and markets, because everything that I've heard, the end product really dictates that genetic, right? And so or to which one they're going to use. So I'm kind of curious what you've seen as far as successful markets that the genetics that you're working with are.
No, yeah, that's very, very, very true. And so we feel that there's going to be specific genetics for textile grade fiber, which is a hot topic here in North Carolina. We're trying to re-sew and rebuckle the textile belt here in our region. We're very fortunate to have a bunch of good industry players that are helping us, and we've got the Wilson College of Textiles at NC State that's fully engaged. So you're correct. Not only the way that you plant that seed and how you grow that crop, but also there's just the genetics will play a role in what you're striving for. And so some genetics, no matter how densely you plant it, it's not going to provide the seed quality or fiber quality rather that somebody in that industry wants to see. It's got to be a certain, there's a certain cleanliness, there's a certain length, there's a certain consistency and diameter. All these things are important. So we've identified 3 different varieties that we're very confident will provide that quality. It's no secret that some of the Chinese varieties, although they do have some of the caution with the THC content, that's been a very large, fiber producer around the globe. There's obviously discussion about how they go about that, and we're hoping to be able to do that in a little more green way, if you will. But more specifically, there'll be certain applications where you just grind the crop up and it's everything all together. That's not going to be as big a deal. That consistency is not as important in that setting. When you separate this bast fiber out, that's going to be a big deal. And so whether you're growing for a heavy herd environment where you've got big herd contracts to fill versus that textile grade fiber, that's kind of the full spectrum. And then, all the way down to the interest in dual crop, where you've got the seed, but there's still going to be a lot of, plant material left over. So it's going to be interesting to see what markets they find for that. Textile grade has it's the most glamorous end use, and it will have the most energy and potentially, have a lot of money potentially that might flow into the industry first. But then when you go into automotive uses, that's going to be a different plant likely. That's going to be a different density. So it's kind of all over the place, Mandi. And this is part of the hard work and the good work that's getting ready to be done, is to match up all these varieties and plant characteristics to the specific market that you're going for, and to really define that. And that's obviously that's been done in Europe. And that's one of the reasons that we are so confident, is we're trying our best to bring that insight and that game plan here to the United States, where they're using the whole crop. And that's not by accident. That took decades of trial and error, and it took a lot of effort to get that crop sold. And I'm hearing now, just on that topic, there's a little bit of there's a bit of a discrepancy right now in the market for fiber versus the market for herd. That was confirmed yesterday on a call with another industry expert. And what we're seeing is, because the herd market is really lighting up, because there's just a lot of applications for that part of the plant, it's actually getting warmed up faster than the fiber. And so it's getting ready to be something we have to figure out, because the last thing we can have is all the herd sold and then all the fiber getting stockpiled and not having a home right away.
Well, that's something that, that I'm going to bring up. I know there's a number of people on this call that are in the textile industry or textile space, is the quality of fiber and the way that it's being processed, right? And what genetics are feeding that grade or quality or standard that's not yet established necessarily. And so, yeah, I'm curious about this discussion.
Yeah, if you've looked on, even LinkedIn, I mean, I'm old school, I guess. I'm basically, I tap LinkedIn and Facebook every now and then, and that's about it. I'm back off as fast as I can. If you look at some of the footage of the processing facilities in the textile industry, and you look at those literally hundreds of thousands of tiny little strings spinning around in this symphony of this processing facility, you have to imagine that if the quality standards are not there, from our side, from the industry side, it's going to wreak havoc. And the industry players that are so important, I don't want to say they're going to lose interest, but they're just going to wait for us to get it right, because they're not going to be able to afford downtime and damage to their equipment to throw them offline, because they're not working with huge margins either. Our system is really unique, because there's a lot of people that make money up at the top, but a lot of the people doing the hard work, the processing and the growing of the crop, they're working with very thin margins, and a lot of times very expensive equipment to achieve those thin margins. So that fiber quality is of the utmost importance. And I'll also will throw in a little tobacco reference here. We're in tobacco country. There's going to be a contamination element to this as well, where whoever's growing the crop and handling the crop, we can't have a lot of foreign material. We can't have a lot of weeds. We can't just turn a blind eye if a crop is 10%, 15% infested with pigweed. That's going to be a problem that has to be dealt with before it goes to one of these higher end processing facilities. Because it could be a weed, it could be plastic, all these wonderful floaty little plastic bags that you see all across the landscape. They're just like they were meant to fly in the air. I can't stand them. But they're everywhere. And it's hard you're not going to see that in a hemp crop. It's 12 feet tall. And so, the careful way we approach this is, it goes back to attention to detail. And we haven't talked enough about farmers in this call, but one of their strengths is their insane attention to detail. The best farmers, bar none, have this laser focus when it comes down to the most minute detail you could imagine, whether it's the depth of the seed or whether it's the torque on the bolt that they're turning. That's the common thread for the best operators, is they have an enormous attention for detail. And that is, to me, where we have to be in this industry, to provide these end users what they need to make this fly.
Okay, we've got lots of questions that I want to go over. I've been trying to answer some of them or touch on some of them that have come in, but Question about how well might hemp seed type fit into the Midwest corn, bean, wheat rotation?
Well, you're pulling on my heartstrings now. That's how I got involved in this industry.
This is my passion. This is what the kind of language I'm speaking.
Yeah, it's your backyard as well. I think the short answer is it would do wonderfully. Much like we rotate cotton in to our crop rotation, the reason being is it's got a really nice taproot that goes down and potentially grabs some of those nutrients that have fallen just a little bit below that more, spread out, more shallow root system that soybeans and corn typically have. So I think hemp will provide the same exact benefit to your rotation. I think it's a scavenger of nutrients. And so there's also some research I think that's important. Once the crop is harvested, there's also this discussion. You're taking the whole crop. You're throwing 12 feet of biomass in the air, and then you're knocking it down a couple inches off the ground, and then that entire crop is removed. And a lot of these nutrients are tied up in that plant. Mm-hmm. And so there's a discussion that I was privy to a while back that is kind of related to the amount of time that the crop rests and how long it takes and spends time on the ground as it breaks down. Hopefully some of that nutrient complex will be returned to the soil, so it's not lost in the factory or in the garments that we're wearing. The other element of that, I'm not sure what weeds are being dealt with out there, but my primary, I always tell this to people, my primary reason for getting into hemp was at the time I was a full-blown crop consultant, and we're still dealing with pigweed. And so not only are we dealing with pigweed, a lot of our chemical compounds, like them or not, they're very much a part of what we're doing right now. They're breaking down, and Mother Nature has figured out a way to slip around all types of chemistry, combined with the fact that the EPA now is tightening up on new products and new development. Not to mention, it's tens of millions of dollars a lot of times to get a product to market. So if you add all those things up, you realize that we're in a much more precarious position than a lot of consumers and the average, consumer realizes. They just don't understand what a fragile dance these farmers are having to play and participate in. So my thoughts were that hemp could likely give some of this chemistry a break. So not only would it outcompete most weeds, but it also would give a rotational break for some of the chemistry that's starting to break down. So I looked at it as a way to buy time until we figure out methods. A lot of people are shifting to cover crops, which is wonderful. But we need to find different ways to combat resistant weeds and problems that are presenting themselves now in our system. So my short answer is it should do wonderfully as a rotation with those two crops.
Can you talk about whether we can re-sow a new crop on a harvested crop, or do we have to rest the land for a season?
This is something that I had a great conversation with a producer in North Carolina, and we both agreed, depending on the scale, and this is a very scale sensitive comment, in a lot of ways we felt, we both agreed, the way to get a crop established was to run the same crop and the same cover crop complex in a series of 3 to 4 seasons. And who knows, it could happen in the second or third season, but the more acclimated that crop gets to that soil, and the more, I guess, the bugs and the bacteria and the different elements of the soil we kind of get familiar with each other, it's actually going to take some time to really prove that. So I would say, my first thought would be to go with a super heavy seed rate, knowing that your 95% germination rate, even if it's that high, to get that crop down in a consistent, soil zone or soil bed, it can be more challenging. But if they've got the right equipment and they've got a lot of experience, establishing crop in residue, I don't think you can try it, but I would not try it at scale. I would definitely try it on a small scale first, make sure that you win with it, and then expand it to other fields. And whoever that is, I hope they get it right, and I hope that they'll share if they've got a magic recipe to make that happen, because it's it's what's next. You know, first of all, we got to get the industry going, but right on the heels of that, we've got to learn to get this crop established in a more no-till environment, which is what a lot of the best farmers in the country now, they do not want to see cold steel near their fields. They do not want to interrupt that soil biology. And so you've got two kind of competing interests, and it's really a big deal to eliminate that and make sure that we can get no-till hemp going. So that's a great question.
I saw that Sandra posted a link. I hope everybody is able to copy it or open it up. The study that was done by Rodell, that it was when hemp was used as rotation with soybean and corn. So thank you for sharing that. And then shout out to Bill. There were a couple of questions on whether or not ASTM was involved. They're very involved. This is something that they discuss a lot. A lot of our members are on that committee and give a lot of feedback. There's also a couple of other awesome standard groups that are putting things together. And so if you guys have questions or want to get involved, let me know. I'm happy to help connect you. So yes, thanks. And then there were a couple of comments too that I want to bring up when we talk about the fiber and the dual crop, and some question around the opportunity to use a dual crop for a textile grade fiber, and the doubt, just because of the quality of fiber. And so it'll be interesting. I guess I know you had touched on that a little bit, but there is definitely a lot of question on whether or not that can be done, or the fiber quality is strong enough or good enough on a dual crop.
I think the key word there was doubt. I don't know that it can't be achieved, but right now the maturity of those two end uses don't sync up. It's just the two harvest times would not be conducive to both uses.
Great. Any other questions? Is hemp considered a cover crop? There's a question. This is something that comes up often. I'm glad to touch on this too. And there are, just so anybody knows, if there are topics that are brought up that we didn't touch on or we didn't dive into, there are 400 interviews published with different professionals, and they're tagged with different topics. They're all transcribed into notes on our Hemp Hallway. So after this, you can get on Hemp Hallway, or right now go to Hemp Hallway, create your profile. But there is an immense amount. When links are shared, we take those links from our meetings and also put them into Hemp Hallway. And so it has become a robust resource. In addition, as a group, we are collectively working together to gather existing data so that we have a bank of peer-reviewed studies that we'll be able to use, and our industry will be able to use to grow the industry, to grow their business.
Yeah, goes back to the question was the answer. I feel like hemp will be an excellent cover crop potential. We just had this discussion the other day where potentially you could establish that crop earlier in, say, a late March, early April setting, and let it get established and let it get ahead of your weed competition. And then in a system where you had a roller or a crimper and you were able to mat that early crop down. It's been our experience with proper soil health that the early stage of that plant is just fun to watch. After a couple of weeks and it gets its root system, there's exponential growth. It's really fun to watch. And so then that would set you up to roll and crimp that crop in, say, May 1st. Which would, more weed protection, a weed barrier. And then likely that's when you could establish, as the other question presented, that would be a perfect setting to establish another crop in the hemp residue, which is the inverse of what that question was. But that has a lot of promise. I'd love to see somebody try that. And they probably could go with a reduced rate so it wouldn't be so cost prohibitive. Because right now, 50, 60 pounds of hemp is not a cheap endeavor per acre. That's going to easily compete with the crop that you're getting ready to plant. So you probably have to drop back to a much lower seed rate to make that feasible, from an economic standpoint. But maybe that will pass, as we get more regional production, and in a couple of years, hopefully the seed cost will come down some.
Awesome. I want to talk about seeds planted per acre a little bit more, but Josh, I'm actually interested. I'd like to turn it over. Last time Josh logged on. Joshua, are you listening or available? Oh, both Joshes. Hi. Okay, so both Joshes. Josh Newsombaum, absolutely, you're welcome to chime in if you'd like. Josh, Coughing. Is that right? I don't know if I said your name right that time. No. So anyways, coming from outside of the industry, right? Interested in fiber, in agriculture, do you have any specific questions that you'd like to dive into that you may have or haven't touched on? I know last time we focused on cannabinoids and you were really wanting to talk about the fiber market. And so I just want to give you an opportunity if you have any specific questions. Maybe. There you go.
All right. Can you hear me?
We can. Absolutely.
It's coughing, ING.
Got you.
Hey, no, not at the moment.
Okay.
We're still just trying to get the fiber industry here as far as processing in the state of Indiana. So that's kind of a key player that has to happen before anything else.
So
I mean, our research trials, of course, that's going to continue to happen. But as far as an industry, we need the industrial scale production to be here.
So I don't know if anybody has any suggestions or any connections to processing that's happening in that area, but Josh would probably be a great person to connect with. Bert, do you have anything that you want to add to that and to the processing itself as the industry is developing?
I'm a big advocate of dual approaches to the industry need. And we've already kind of touched on that. If there's not this huge outfit that's coming to town, I always make the analogy, one farm operation is subject to pay $1 million for a large piece of equipment just to harvest their crop. So I still, although we definitely, we took our medicine in our state and with our co-op, and because of circumstances and timing, we're still here, but we're just now, just as Josh said, we're kind of waiting. We hear about the facilities, we hear about the promise, we hear about the markets, but we've chosen to just take a step back. And there's a lot of new groups that are taking this initiative, and they're growing hemp and they're investing in some equipment. And so that would be my simple suggestion, would be to tie into some of these domestic producers of equipment and tap into that network. I think that will be its own consistency. The more regional equipment there is, if you work together and get some farmers together, to buy some of this equipment, then all of a sudden you're controlling part of the supply chain, and you're going to add value to that product. But farmers don't necessarily want to go out and sell a bunch of goods. So that's where it's going to be important for some of these people in your group to go out and seek these farmers that have the desire and are just lacking the market to supply. I think there's a lot of interest, and if there were a market, promise the farmers will supply it. There's no question in my mind. Farmers are probably the most dynamic and unique group of businessmen there are, businessmen and women. So I feel as soon as the market opens up and comes online, the farmers will feel the need the next year. That's just how they operate.
Absolutely. I agree.
Awesome. So we're at our hour. I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer. I don't know if there's any other questions that you have up. I know somebody mentioned something to Karen just now. Neil mentioned something about grants. I don't know if Karen has anything she wants to add. For those of you that don't know, Karen lives in DC, and I got lucky enough to go out and stay with her and had an opportunity to meet with a number of different executives and leaders in different groups that support the hemp industry, and really educate, build relationships, talk about opportunities. And so I don't know if Karen, if you want to add anything maybe about our seed trials, or I'm kind of putting her on the spot. So sorry, Karen.
Well, I see Neil's question here about, is there a way to get funding for new hemp production? And there are, we haven't, as far as I know, we haven't become eligible for the loans that other commodities get. that's something that we need to be working for in the Farm Bill. But there are funds being given out by NIFA for experimental sites, and they've given out about $30 million last year, and I think that there will be more. And the other one that I haven't had a chance to look into is NRCS, the resource recovery area where conservation service, where they if we can get our act together on the data that shows we are a conservation, we know we are, but we're going to have some studies that show we are, then I think we might certainly be able to get into that line. But frankly, I mean, it's a huge thing to have to try to go into USDA and find all the sources for money. I'm not opposed to trying to do it, but I haven't had a chance yet.
We've been busy. And something too is to give credit to these seed trials. We heard over and over again this last week the value to them and the value that they bring to the industry from their perspective as a national third party trial. And so keep that in mind, that this plays a lot of weight to the growth of our industry from the top down. So
yeah, it's well worth us doing everything we can to get this trial funded, because USDA really was very pleased to hear about it. They know about and have funded various regional or state trials, but those don't give them a picture of the country and where we might be able to grow more productively in one area than they knew, and so on. So a national seed trial like you guys have put together is really of value to them. And we also met with FAR, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, and they actually have a hemp consortium, and they were very interested in learning about the trial too. So we're trying to take more than baby steps, maybe big steps, to move along.
So I just again want to give thanks, Karen, to all your time and your help. And more and more I'm blown away by the strength of who shows up and who's willing to support, push the industry forward. And so Karen's definitely at the top of the list. And so thank you very much for your help. And also for anybody else, Bert, thank you for coming on and sharing your time. For everybody else that participates, this is really about us moving forward. I see a lot of you that have come on before. If you guys need anything, or if there's anything specific we can do, don't hesitate to reach out to either Joanne or I or Kayla at any time. We'd love to see you at NOCO. Please share the nomination or nominate other leaders. Take some time to plug in some information and share who's who in the industry and why you think they deserve awards. We're focused on bigger things than the best CBD gummy this year, really focused on carbon impact and agriculture and economic development and things like that. So Bert, do you have anything that you want to add before we sign off?
Yeah, I guess I could plug a couple of events in addition to NOCO. Right now, give support to some of the players who are out at the World Ag Expo. I had the privilege to go there a couple of years. That really opened my mind to the scale of California. Not sure what they have to offer the industry yet, but there's a great group of people out there right now representing the hemp industry. And I was privileged to work with Christian Gray at that time to get the first hemp expedition involved in that. And so I want to remember those guys out there as they're trudging through the hundreds of thousands of people that'll show up there. And then also in our state, in our region, we like to consider it one of the more technical events in the country, the Industrial Hemp Summit. That will be at the end of this month. So one's very, very soon. If you can fly out to California tonight to check it out, you got a few days, but the other's a couple of weeks out, and just always really proud to be a part of that and the work that they've done and the professional and technical nature that it brings to the industry is so important. And then of course, NOCO, you know, they've just been there from the beginning. That's almost like a reunion of sorts. There's just so many good people that come together for that. So I did want to make mention of those two things, you know, before I get out of here.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. I see Klaus just shared the link as well for the Industrial Hemp Summit. So that was also brought to our attention while we were in DC. So it's good to see that people are attending and showing up. There's also a presentation I saw Cornell has. They've got one coming up in February and one the 1st of March. It's a day-long event, same sort of presentation style, but all online. Okay, you guys, well, again, thank you very, very much for joining. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Morgan is going to be talking about the grain, the feed and grain. I really encourage you guys to get involved. If you know somebody who is interested in donating or sponsoring or helping to fund and put some effort into these trials, please let us know. Please reach out. We're really working collaboratively, and it's going to take our entire industry to really ideally, that's the way I want it to be presented. This is industry-owned data, and it's for the industry. And so if the industry comes together, that's our best opportunity. So without that, I guess, Joanne, anything else? And we'll say goodbye. Bye, Klaus. Thank you. Joanne?
Just my usual, reach out if there's anything I could do for you guys, membership, questions about projects, anything going on, don't hesitate to reach out.
Cool. Thank you. We had a great meeting today. Hannah, it's good to see you. I hope you get to come.
No, I've been here. I'm just like on some like holidays, mountain trip, and here is like bad connection. So I was the same like situation like Bert, but I was listening. It was very helpful, and yeah, please reach us out for the seeds. Be happy to give more than seeds from our own experience. So yeah.
Yes, lots of experience.
Bye.
Thanks. So, thank you very, very much. I appreciate you. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to chime in. I'm happy to stay on for a minute. Gator, I'd love to reach out to you again. Nicole, Bill, great job. Looks like there were a lot of people interested in ASTM today, so that's great. Ray, Jerome, Justin. I can see everybody on the screen now. When there's 3 screens, I feel like I only see who shows up on my first screen. And so. Okay, well, thank you guys. Have a good day. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Goodbye.